All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Het, and we have Stan back here. I'm going to have to change this little setting right here. I realize Stan's video says Eric on it. He is not Eric. He kind of like Eric, but different name and different body. But Eric is unfortunately sick today, so he is not going to be able to make it. But Stan was willing to step in here and fill in here last minute. So really appreciate that. But let me go over the topics. Then we can talk a little bit about what we've been playing. And then while Stan's talking, I'll go ahead and change the names here. But bear with us here for a moment. Let me get through these topics so we can get this show on the road. So first things first, we're obviously going to talk about what we've been playing this week, if anything interesting at all. And then Final Fantasy VIII, there's been some speculation over the fact, at least the idea that Square might be putting some voice acting into this Final Fantasy VIII remaster on the Switch. And there's some information suggesting that we're kind of wishy-washy on it, but we're going to talk about it. And also whether we think that would be a good improvement or idea. Then Final Fantasy XIV is getting a live action series. And I'm absolutely certain that Eric is kicking himself right now for being sick because he is such a Final Fantasy XIV fan. But me and Stan are going to muddy our way through this discussion of Final Fantasy XIV. Then we have RPGs coming out in July. There's 7 of them from what we could see. So we'll get into that, show off some trailers, talk about them, go a little bit in depth with certain ones, kind of gloss over other ones, but just give you an idea what's coming out. And then we'll wrap things up with a Second Entity's question on Discord, who asks, has there ever been an RPG that you guys really liked or enjoyed? I think is what he's trying to say. I had one thing about it that kind of ruined the overall experience. Alternatively, have you ever played a mediocre RPG that you thought could have been great with a few changes? Very interesting question. So we'll kind of get into that and see where that takes us. But that's what we got on the agenda today. And before we get into the actual topics, Stan, why don't you give us an idea of what you've been playing this week? And that way, while I'm doing that, I'll kind of reset this framing here so people don't call you Eric.
I appreciate it. All right. Well, I haven't been playing very many RPGs recently. Just been kind of going through my Switch backlog, actually. There was a sale on some digital games a while back, and I picked up Mega Man X 1 through 4, the first part of the Mega Man X collection they released.
Oh, okay.
Playing that's
were you a big Mega Man
games?
Oh, so you were a Mega Man fan beforehand?
Yeah. Okay. I've played them all, and in fact, I have the collection they released back on the PS2. But my PS2 is not plugged in, and it's in storage somewhere actually. So, so I wanted to play those games again. I saw it was on sale. I was like, oh, they got me. So,
yeah, I think
playing that.
I think that's one of the best or coolest things about re-releases and like remasters and things like that is it's like you said, the PS2's in storage. The idea of dragging that thing out and trying to plug it in and dealing with like
it doesn't connect to my HD TV. Yeah, like it's an inconvenience. Yeah,
it looks ugly. So when they do this stuff, it lets you play the games again. So very cool.
Yeah, and it's got some cool features on there like artwork and soundtrack for all those games, like that you can play from the menu. It's kind of cool. Put it on in the background or something.
Cool.
Also, there was a game on sale I got. I think it's called Fast RMX, if I remember the title correctly. It's a racing game, kind of like a futuristic, like F-Zero type of game.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually came out on the Wii U, and this is like the enhanced edition, it's the Wii U game, but with like all the DLC included, essentially. So
I don't
That's
think I've
nice.
ever heard of that game. It's called.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Fast. It's like FAST
Okay.
RMX,
All right.
and it's kind of like a future racer F-Zero type of game. Is
And
best description for it.
did you get it on the Switch? I'm sorry, I missed
Yeah,
that
I got
part.
it. It's on the Switch.
Okay.
It
That's,
used to be on the Wii U. That was the original version, and
mm-hmm.
the Switch is like the director's cut, enhanced edition, whatever you want to call it. Includes everything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Pulling
So
up the trailer right now.
if anybody is like sad that F-Zero has not been a thing for the last like decade, and are like really thirsty for that, I think it's for the price. It's a pretty good game.
Yeah, it looks very, very similar in its aesthetic.
Yeah, and it has a mechanic where you have like you can change your jet, like your booster color from blue to orange. And so the boosts that are on the ground that you have to hit to like accelerate you,
Mm-hmm.
you have to match the color. It's just a toggle. You push a button and it changes the color of your booster, and it propels you farther.
Oh,
Like
okay. So it kind of keeps you engaged with what's going on.
yeah, and in fact, if you have the wrong color when and you go over the boost, so if you're blue and you go over an orange one, it actually slows you down. So yeah, you're kind of like scanning, like looking ahead, trying to see what boosts are coming up and trying to plan accordingly while also racing around and stuff. It's pretty fun.
Looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
How about
Well,
you?
let me get this trailer off the screen here because I'm going to show off what I've been playing. 1 second, I got to grab it. All right. So this is something that, well, first off, I bought Bloodstained on the PS4 and I was going to get the Switch version. However, I've heard so many bad things about the Switch version. I can't comment whether it's true or not. So if you're an avid fan of the Switch version, I haven't played it. However, I've heard
Hmm.
things like on the Switch it runs at like 30 frames per second, but on the PS4 it runs at 60, which is odd. And there's
Hmm.
been some other things like delay that's for apparently they're still working out on the Switch version, but on the PS4 it's not even an issue. And it's not it's really strange because it's a Bloodstained is a platformer. It's not very intensive or I think I'm trying to think of the word. It's not very difficult to play on the hardware at all. But it looks
Yeah.
like it was just really originally designed for the PS4, and then the Switch was kind of a decision made later. So they're working on it, and I think they're gonna get it fixed. But I bought the PS4 version, and honestly, thus far, I've really been enjoying it. I'm like 12 hours in, so Eric was telling me your first time through it goes through maybe 15 hours. I got it for $40. I'm getting a lot of enjoyment out of it. There's a lot of replay value. And I definitely suggest it for anyone that's a Castlevania fan, definitely, because I know the creator of Castlevania worked on this game, and it was a crowd-funded project. But it's got great voice acting, the art aesthetic. They redid it; it looks fantastic. The combat feels really good. It's a very Castlevania like with a lot of RPG stuff. You know, obviously you're leveling up and stuff and getting new equipment and that whole gaming loop of crafting and it's just a lot of fun. And I found myself just not wanting to put it down over the weekend, and actually kept me up pretty late on Saturday night, which has not happened in a while. Usually at this point in my life, I end up passing out, you know, on a Saturday night. Like, wow, did I really go to bed
Yeah.
at 9:30 last night? Yes, I did. You know, but this kept me
Yeah.
up till about 2 o'clock in the morning. So I'm having a really good time with it. I'm going to finish it, and I know Eric's probably finished it by now. So we'll have to get into more of our thoughts on that uh, next week. But have you picked that up, by the way, or do you plan on picking that up, Bloodstain?
I haven't. I haven't. No. It
Oh
looks
man, you
good.
should.
I mean, it looks good for what it is.
Here's the
I
thing.
have
But
such a backlog, though. I'm thinking I can add it there, and
it's shelf
by the
space.
time I get to it, it'll. Yeah, by the time I get to it, it might be a little bit cheaper.
Yeah.
So
Well, the thing is, I'm not a huge fan of that style of game. I like
Mhm.
them, but usually I play them for like 10 or 15 minutes and then I get kind of bored. And that's just me,
Yeah.
right? That's my weakness. Not any real criticism, but there's something about this game that I found myself I put on a podcast and just enjoyed the grind. So it was a lot of fun. And I'm still
Cool.
playing it this week. So, but the other thing I got was this mini emulation device. Both me and Eric got one, but it's called the Pocket-Go. It's a new, made from the same company that makes the BitBoy, which is this tiny little emulation device you can emulate like
Hmm.
NES games and stuff like that on. But this new BitBoy came out just recently. I had to pre-order it. I got it a little bit early, and it's supposed to be able to emulate, PlayStation 1 games, SNES games, NES games, and for the $50 that I spent on it, it's actually a pretty cool device. Now, I will say that the downside of it is it's a kind of hit or miss on SNES games for emulation on the Pocket Go. It's
Hmm.
I was kind of surprised by that because it'll play like, for example, I tried to put uh, a game that I think wouldn't be difficult to run, like Vandal Hearts from the PlayStation 1. I put that on the BitBoy to see how it would run. Ran fine, no problems. Like it looked great, it played great. I was like, wow, this is playing a PlayStation 1 game and it's a super tiny device. And
Hmm.
but then when I went to go play Final Fantasy VI, I was getting like 12 to 15 frames per second, and it was actually at around 20, which isn't terrible for a turn-based RPG at all. But I noticed when you cast spells, there would be this black screen behind the spells. So I went to the
Hmm.
settings, and transparency was turned off. So once I turned that on, the spells looked like they should. It would only show the spell, not the background. However, all of a sudden, it's getting down to like 12 frames per second. Sometimes it'd get down to like 9. And, I was like, man, this is disappointing. But other games work great. So Game Boy Advance
Hmm.
games run phenomenal. This thing even came with, that's the other thing, it came with like 100 ROMs on it. And one of the games that comes on it comes with Quake, Doom, and Quake 2. I was really surprised it came with all these games because on the
Nice. Yeah.
website it said does not come with games, and then it came with all these games. I was pleasantly surprised, but it runs Doom and Quake really well. I think, well, as reasonably well as you can expect. Quake 2, I
Hmm.
don't know why they put that on here. That game was like 10 frames per second, but I think it was just kind of like this is the max it could do. Maybe I don't know, but I mean for $50, dude, I've been playing some Pokemon on here, trying to get geared up for Sword and Shield because it's been a while since I played any of those games, and I've been playing some Shinobi 3. I've been playing some um, Road Rash 2 on the Sega Genesis. Some of those are just games like that, So really, really cool device. Definitely recommend checking it out. I haven't had an issue with it yet. So,
Hmm.
anyways, that's what I've been getting at this week. Let me
What
but
what kind of memory does it take, or is it
right
all
now
just like internal on the
well,
device?
so that's the thing. You have to have an SD card. It comes with an 8 gigabyte SD card. At least the one I
Nice.
got did, and on that came with all the emulation software and et cetera like that, and the games like that. So
Hmm.
without the SD card in there, it you can turn it on, but it doesn't do anything. So it has to have
Mhm.
that SD
I
card
have to
in
have
there,
it.
and you can pop the SD card out. You can get a bigger SD card. I'm not sure the size that it'll take up to. I think somewhere I saw like 128 gigs or something like that. But I can't imagine this thing running like high intent. Like you're not probably not going to play Gran Turismo on this, or something like that on here. So if you're primarily
Right.
sticking to like Sega Genesis games and NES games and stuff like that, and Game Boy Advance games, Game Boy Color, things like that, 8 gigabytes, that's hundreds of games, right? Now once you
Yeah,
start,
especially for those older games. Yeah.
yeah. So once you get to the PlayStation games, okay, those start to be a higher amount of size, especially when you get to like Final
Mhm.
Fantasy games, which are 3 and 4 discs. But for SNES games and stuff like that, 8 gigabytes. But I mean, it comes with a little USB device. SD card reader, so I could just plug that in my computer and I could easily transfer everything to a bigger one. It's very, very easy. So it's got a backlit screen. It's apparently supposed to play for like 6 hours on a charge, which isn't bad. I wish it was a little bit more, but I don't know. It's fine. I'm usually not playing this for 6 hours straight. So I think those days are over for handhelds for me. Yeah. So anyways, it's pretty cool. I like it. Let's see here. Pop out this about chat. Looks like Dante's here. He says Bloodstained is great despite the annoying loading. Yeah, that is a thing, but I kind of quickly got over it. He also said he wanted to play Sonic Adventure, but PS Now doesn't have it as a download. I don't know. I've never played Sonic Adventure, so I can't comment on that. Andrew Harrison says Eric conveniently sick after the launch of Shadowbringers. Yeah, that is kind of suspect, Andrew. I suspect he's sick. He may have gotten sick from staying up all night playing Shadowbringers. I don't know, but yeah, no, he's pretty bad. He said he's not in good shape right now. So, but anyway, so our first
topic, Eric.
Yeah, he'll be around.
Get better.
But moving on to our first topic here, let me pull up the article. Now, this has been in a few different places. We were kind of like, oh, I don't know if we want to talk about this because it's just one of those things where you're not sure if this is really a thing. But we've seen it in a couple different places. I'm starting to see YouTube videos pop up about it. So I figured we would talk about it, whether we think this could be a thing, and then B, whether this would actually be something we would want or be interested in. So the latest news is, or however you want to characterize this, is that Final Fantasy VIII, the remaster coming to the Switch, may feature English and Japanese voice acting. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds ridiculous. That's initially what I thought too. But given the amount of work we saw that they've been doing on this game, basically redesigning the character models and things like that, it seems like they're doing more work than the typical remaster. And we've seen them put in a lot of effort into other remasters like Final Fantasy XII, for example. They really went all out and redid, Vaughn's abs and all the character models. And, they put the reorchestrated soundtrack in there. And, they put a lot of effort into that, redid the battle system. So it's not unusual, but we've never seen them go back and add voice acting to really any of their Final Fantasy games, aside from, I guess, Final Fantasy IV, but that was a complete remake. Yeah.
On the D. Yeah.
So,
I think that's the only one.
Yeah. So it's kind of unusual, but here's the story. Well, I'm just going to read this so y'all are up to speed on the same information here. And then that way we can just kind of talk about it here. Now, this is from ESOgaming.com. And it says, I'm just going to read this article. I don't even want to call it an article. It's like 2 paragraphs. But it says, now here's something really interesting. According to the source code of the official website for Final Fantasy VIII Remaster, Square Enix will add both English and Japanese voiceovers. The original game did not feature any voices, but these will be the first time gamers will hear Squall, Renoa, Ultimisia, and all other characters featured in it. As the official website states, the game will have English and Japanese voiceover, and it will have English, French, Italian, German, and Spanish subtitles. Here's the full game description that can be found in the source code. Final Fantasy VIII casts unlikely heroes into a war to save the world. The military nation of Galbadia has declared war on the dukedom of Dalet, who are, I probably shouldn't read some of this stuff, but it says who are left with no choice but to hire a mercenary force for their defense. Enter Seed and its newest member, Squall Leonhardt. Together with his friend Squall joins Renoa Hartley, a member of a resistance group, on an adventure that holds the fate of the world in balance. Almost there. Final Fantasy VIII Remastered marks the 20th anniversary of its original release with a complete visual refresh and brings the game's classic story to modern platforms. Blah, blah, blah. With fully overhauled visuals, see your favorite characters come to life never before. Final Fantasy VIII Remastered is an RPG available in English and Japanese voiceover, and it's also text localized into French, German, and Spanish. So here's a screenshot from the source code of the website. And right here, they highlighted for us to see. This Final Fantasy VIII Remastered is an RPG available in English and Japanese voiceover and a text localized into French, Italian, German, and Spanish. I think it's interesting how they went out of their way to say that it's available in English and Japanese voiceover, but in addition to that, it says text localized into French, Italian, German, and Spanish. It makes that distinction that there's, this localization for the text version, but then there's voiceover for the Japanese and English. I want to check one thing here and make sure I got my. Oh, okay. Just occurred to me I might have my webcam mic on. Okay, good. So anyways, so that's basically it. That's the story. I don't know how I feel about this. I think that on one hand, I think it's probably more than likely just a mistake that was found in the source code. As far as I know, this wasn't actually printed on the website. This was just something like hidden in the source code that maybe for whatever reason they typed in at one point and it was a mistake and it never got printed. I don't know if that's actually something that they would do. And I think that they would probably have that at E3 because that would create a lot of hype. But at the same time, they are doing a lot of work to this game. So it's kind of in this gray area where I think maybe, but probably not. What do you think?
Yeah, it would seem odd that we know like specific details about the cheat codes being added to the game, but whether or not there's a voice cast for the game is still a mystery, right? That would be kind of odd. Usually those kinds of things like aesthetic things like voice acting and music and graphics are like the things that are all very revealed early on.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
like, especially since this would be, Final Fantasy VIII was not expected to have a remaster, so it was already quite the reveal at E3. E3 is all about making a big boom, and I guarantee you, if that trailer started with Renoa talking, people would have lost their mind.
True, yeah.
So
yeah, why wouldn't now? Perhaps they haven't announced it because the voices are currently being recorded right now, and it just didn't have anything ready.
maybe they're still trying to figure out too if they want to do it.
they're gonna bring in the voice actors, record it, and then be like, "Okay, what do you guys think?
Like this
Yes
was
or
a
no? Yeah, yes or no?
idea.
Right?
This was a horrible idea. Well, the thing is, like, how would it work? Because if they're not remaking the game, usually studios will kind of cut costs by only doing voice acting during the pivotal story moments. And then, the in between, it's all text. We saw that in, like Final Fantasy 12 and Final Fantasy 10 a little bit, where, if you talk to NPCs and stuff, you may not get voice acting. And they could do that here, but the problem is most of the pivotal story points, I don't say most, but maybe half the story points are FMVs where there is no talking. So it's kind of like, I guess they could still, there's still other story sequences where they would have voice acting, I guess, but it just seems weird how that would be implemented. And I kind of feel as if Square would have to just go full hog on it and do like complete voice acting or not do it at all, because it would be really weird which scenes they choose and which scenes they don't choose.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. It does seem odd that it would be in the code there though. So
yeah,
tough to say. But whether it's if it's there, I hope that there's an option to turn it off. Honestly, not because I think it will be bad or anything, but like people grew up with this game and probably have an idea of how the characters sound in their head.
Which character? Yeah, well, first off, I've always imagined Headmaster Sid sounded like Robin Williams.
Yeah, so if they don't get if they don't get someone who sounds like how you imagined the character, right?
Yeah.
Then it can be awkward, right? To like get used to those voices. Sometimes they can grow on you and it kind of becomes the voice in your head like as you proceed, but
well, thing with JRPGs is, and this is just my opinion, but JRPGs kind of started to go over the hill a little bit once voice acting became a normal thing. And I think that's part of that's because voice acting for Japanese RPGs is just so difficult to nail down because like
Hmm.
they're so
There's so many things that can
animated.
go wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, they're so animated and it's just when you read the text in your head, it sounds the most positive way it could come across in your head. But, I'm trying to think which character in Final Fantasy VIII would drive me nuts with a voice actor. And I don't know, it's either, in my mind, it's either Cypher or Zell. For some reason, I just look at Zell and I can tell that he would just have some like
You're
nasally,
just
high
thinking of how
pitched
they would,
voice.
yeah, how they would cast him. Yeah.
And I'd be like, that's not what he sounds like. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So I wish
Well,
they had.
like,
Go ahead.
well, I think like it would make sense. Like for Squall, I think Squall has had one voice actor across like all of the media, or Leon if you prefer. Right? He's
Yeah,
Kingdom Hearts, Dissidia. I'm pretty sure it's the same voice all for all those games. So that
sure.
probably wouldn't be too weird, right? If you heard that voice. But then like I know just in the latest Dissidia game they added Renoa as a DLC character, and
So they have that.
her voice in my opinion is very obnoxious.
Really, I haven't played that game or heard it. It's pretty bad.
Well, some people are fine with it. It's just kind of like,
Very
I don't know.
controversial. Yeah.
It grinds my gears a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, and that's the thing. It's really hard to nail that down. So I think
Hmm.
you're right. They'd have to have an option to turn it off because if you're forced to play with it on, it's just if you don't like it,
That would be silly because like this is looking like it's going to be the best version of the game, right?
right?
And voice acting is something that's very um, particular, like a particular choice for some people. Some
Yeah.
people like it, some people don't. Some people only prefer the Japanese with English subtitles. So like just if you're gonna have it in there, you got to have all the options. Otherwise, there's some portion of your audience will be disappointed, right?
Mm,
So
yeah.
if like you said, if you're gonna do it, go all out with it, and also provide the players plenty of options.
It would be awesome if they would give you an option to, like you can choose Squall and there's 4 different voice actors and you can like try them all out and like pick the one you like the best. I know that would be outrageous, but one can dream.
Yeah,
So I don't know. Like it's an interesting concept. There's a part of me that feels like at the end of the day, this little source code deal was just a mistake that wasn't supposed to be in there because Final
yeah,
Fantasy VIII remastered on the Switch is going to sell plenty of copies. I don't know how many more copies it would sell with voice acting than without. And it's people weren't really expecting it. So it makes me wonder, especially given the fact that Square usually just looks at remasters as a cash grab.
right.
The, they're not, from what Katase said in an interview, they're not touching up like the pre-rendered backgrounds. They're not touching up anything else except the character models. So if they're not even doing that, it makes me wonder, would they really go hire voice actors for a 40 to 50 hour possible experience? I don't know how much it would
Yeah,
cost,
yeah.
but
Usually that's pretty expensive,
especially
but it
for,
is also like one of the last things you do, right?
right.
So that could be why they haven't announced it yet.
Yeah. Or if they just did, you know, 2 or 3 key scenes or something. I don't know, but I don't know. It just,
Yeah.
I'm putting this in the I don't know box. That would be cool, but I don't think so. That's a small little box.
Also, this is like if the game comes out and it turns out this is not true, then that sucks also because there's going to be some people who read this rumor and are get excited about it, right?
Yeah. So, and
And
that's
then they're going to be disappointed if it's not real. That's kind of why like sometimes leaks like this are a double-edged sword, right? You can kind of get some inside info on where development of a game is going, but then it's still in development, so these things don't always come end up how they were planned, right? And you can get yourself hyped up.
Yeah. Well, and that's
on gaming news.
That's a really good point too, because there was so much drama around the fact that Final Fantasy VIII wasn't coming to the Switch. All these other Final Fantasy games were coming to the Switch. We've only gotten the PC version of Final Fantasy VIII, which is a crappy version that came on Steam, and you had to mod it basically to get like a decent version, or play the original PlayStation version. And so there's all these people very, very upset about it. So, people are super hyped once they make this announcement that it's coming out finally, an actual good version. And people are so stoked about it. They're redoing the character models. You can actually see Squall's face now. It's amazing. And then, within 2 or 3 weeks, you see something like this. And just like you said, the people that were excited about this could have their hopes dashed when something like this doesn't come to fruition. So it's a really good point.
Like maybe they were planning to do it, and then they said, you know what, no, that'll be too expensive, but it was still in the code for the website, right?
Yeah.
And then people find it, and then now they're expecting it, right? Or
it's just maybe they thought, oh, we'll do this, but then they thought, well, if we do it for 8, then people want us to do it for 7 and 9, and then it's just, do we really want to do this? So yeah, but it'd be a really cool idea. So I guess at this point, I think this game has to come out soon. I think at the end of this year, I thought is where I saw it. Like, there's not an actual release date, but that's the speculated date. So we should know something pretty soon. So anyways, so that's that. On our next topic, we have a very interesting Final Fantasy XIV getting a live action television series. Now, let me just pull this article up, and I'll go ahead and read that as well, so y'all can be up to the same level of information that we're at. So this is from I can't ever pronounce his website. Gematsu. Is it Gematsu or Gamatsu, or I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
That website.
Gematsu.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. But the weird thing about doing a podcast is you say all these things like in your private life, and you don't ever think about it, and then suddenly there's a mic in front of your face and people are watching, and you're like, oh, I don't know, is that really, like, you start getting all this self-doubt.
Yeah. So, how do you pronounce these things?
Yeah. So title of this article is Sony Pictures and HiveMind announce live action Final Fantasy XIV television series, and it's an original story set in the world of Eorza, which is the world of Final Fantasy XIV. So here's the article. I'm just going to go through it real quick. It says Sony Pictures Television and HiveMind Entertainment, the production company behind Amazon's The Expanse, is a great show, and the upcoming Netflix adaptation of The Witcher, have announced, that looks pretty sketchy, but has announced a partnership with Square Enix to develop a live-action adaptation television series of Final Fantasy XIV. Here is the overview of the series via Sony Pictures. The live-action television series will tell an original story set in a fantastic world of Eorza based on Final Fantasy XIV, the franchise's blockbuster online role-playing game. Since it first debuted in 2013, the online title has continued to delight and amass millions of players around the world year over year, and only further cemented Final Fantasy as one of the most storied and influential franchises in gaming history, inspired directly by the world and characters of the title's 14th installment. The project will embrace the bold and genre-bending sensibilities of the revered and long-running Final Fantasy series as it explores the struggle between magic and technology and a quest to bring peace to a land in conflict. Filled with iconic hallmarks of the title's revered mythology, Magitech and Beastmen, airships, and chocobos, the forthcoming series will feature a mixture of new and familiar faces. Those will notably include the live-action debut of Cid, one of the game's central and most beloved characters who has appeared in almost every installment of the franchise to date. That's the end of the Sony thing. There's a little bit more here, but I just have to stop and say, WTF. Whoever wrote this does not like Final Fantasy, because saying that Cid is one of the most beloved characters who's appeared in every game, basically. That Sid is not the same character. There just happens to be like 12 guys who are all named Sid. But
maybe they only played Final Fantasy VII and they really liked Sid, and then they just assumed that like
that Sid was in all the others.
That Sid appears in all of them. Yeah,
they're like, man, that's such a cool character to bring.
I don't know. It just seems strange.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, like you can already like when I saw that, I was like immediately my hype level went from like a 10 to like a 7 because I was like, oh, I'm reading a bunch of BS right now. But so anyways, it says Final Fantasy 14 and is the perfect gateway into Final Fantasy for longtime fans and newcomers alike, said Sony Pictures Television co-president Chris Parnell in a press release. This show is about embracing and embodying all of the elements that have made the mythos such as endlessly captivating phenomenon, and it's an immense honor to be bringing all the iconic characters, settings, and concepts, including fan favorites like Sid, and of course the Chocobos, to life for a television audience. Hive Mind Entertainment co-founder, co-president Jason Brown added, television is the ideal medium to capture the extraordinary depth, sophisticated themes, and unparalleled imagination of Final Fantasy and its multitude of unique and fully realized characters. We're working tirelessly to bring together artists around the world who are united in honoring the extraordinary legacy of this franchise and its millions of fans around the world. An air date of the television series was not announced. Oh, okay. So I have some thoughts on this, but I'm curious what you think. Well, first off, let's get some disclosures out there. I've played maybe 100 hours of Final Fantasy 14. How much Final Fantasy 14 have you played, Stan?
I don't remember how many hours it was, but I jumped in with A Realm Reborn, and I played that to the end.
Okay.
Off and on took me about a couple months.
So I suspect
that was when it was new, and past that I didn't.
So you didn't get into all the other expansions. So we're basically in the same boat.
Which is apparently the best parts.
Okay.
Right? Well, yeah. You buy the base game, you beat it, but then you had your fill, but then everybody tells you like, oh no, all the stuff that comes after is the best.
If you would have kept playing, you would have get to the good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time, but in this case, I think it's supposed to be true. So, but I have to imagine that if they're going to make a television series based on this and they're going to try to stick to the stories in the game, which I highly doubt they're going to do. I think they're going to start off with something that kind of looks like the game, and then it's just going to be something else by the end of it. But if they try to stick to it and be authentic, I have to imagine they would stick with the Realm Reborn, that part of the game first. Maybe that would be season 1 or 2. I don't know. I mean, that game has so many different stories, and depending on what class you pick, there's all these side quests and stuff. It's hard for me to imagine them telling that story without leaving so much out, because it's almost the same problem you have with a book where you try to make a film or TV adaptation. Like even with Game of Thrones, they had to leave stuff out. As authentic as they tried to be in the beginning, there was just stuff they couldn't put in there for time constraints. So with this game, like this is something that like teams have been working on for years, like large groups of people, and they have to keep people entertained for 1,000 hours. So it's just the amount of content that's there. It's just I don't know, man. I don't know if you can actually do that and have it feel like, at least to the players, that they're capturing the spirit of what makes 14 great. But at the same time, I think it could be a good show despite that. But there's just, I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about this. What do you think? Are you?
Well, I mean, it could be good because, like you said, they have so much material to draw on from.
Mm-hmm.
But usually, where you run into issues with like a film or TV adaptation is where they feel it's necessary to step by step follow the same story as the game, and like to a T, right, and include everything.
Yeah.
You're usually better off like like with Marvel Comics, they pick and choose the comic book stories from all the decades of comics that they think will be best, like that they can tweak just slightly and adapt to a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So they should probably, I'm guessing they're storyboarding how they want the TV show to work, right? And they can kind of pick and choose the most important plot points, I think, of the game.
Well, do you think the writers are actually playing the game all the way through right now? Or do you think they've just
Mm,
been given like a quick kind of like outline of like what happens and they'll like, because I have
well,
to suspect it's probably the latter. Like, it's probably like
probably.
a 4-page document with like the general.
Hopefully, they would consult some experts or developers. Like, if the main goal of the show is to get people who like the game to watch, then that would be ideal, right?
Yeah,
If you consulted a lore expert, right,
right.
and had him read over your script and have that person tell you like no or yes, like this is good or this is not good,
Yeah,
that would be the best way to go.
yeah. I think you're right. If they want to make a authentic experience, I just think it's interesting that it's going to be live action for one,
Yeah.
and the fact that Square doesn't appear to be really involved with this that much other than licensing it out.
Mm.
You know, they've they've made a few movies in their time. They've all been CGI, but
Yeah.
you'd think they'd want more of a center stage with this. Not that they're going to be producing a television series themselves or anything like that, but
Yeah, well, they're not the only producer, but they made a Tomb Raider live action movie,
hmm
released it in theaters, and I
yeah,
think in most theaters nationwide here in the U.S. So it does seem odd that like a Final Fantasy TV show would come out and their name's not on it.
yeah, especially with how protective they are of that brand.
Hmm.
Like, given the fact that there's things like they won't let mature rated mods in Final Fantasy 15 because they're worried how that might affect the brand or the image. And the fact that when 14 came out initially, it was a terrible game and getting horrible reviews, and they didn't just drop it. They went back and fixed it because they were worried how it might make them appear. All the endless trying to fix Final Fantasy 15 and make
Maybe
fans happy. They were really worried about that, and the way it
maybe
makes them
the
look.
maybe the show will follow the story of the 1.0 version since that's not available anymore, right? It's like the
so
meteor up in the sky, like coming down to destroy
so what if like yeah,
Eorzea.
what if the first season comes out and everyone just was like, this is a horrible show. Like, it's just
and then
absolute trash. And then
and
they
then they're
just
like, yeah, a show reborn, right?
yeah, and they're just like, all right, whole new cast, new director, like and they just work that into the same exact way, and it's amazing afterwards. That would be honestly, I would be all for that. That would be fantastic. Thing is, you just don't know that's currently happening.
Yeah,
You don't know, and you
we'll
don't
have
have
to
the
see.
foresight.
It's a Sony, right?
Yeah, so
Is
Sony
involved.
Pictures Television and Hive Mind Entertainment. I don't know about Hive Mind Entertainment, but apparently it's the production company behind Amazon's The Expanse, which was a really cool sci-fi show based off some books, I believe. I only
Hmm.
watched the first 2 seasons, but it was really good from what I remember, and I need to catch up on it, to be honest. And then they're also working on the upcoming Netflix adaptation of The Witcher, which we haven't really talked too much about on here, but that looks to be terrible from what I've seen.
Visually, at least, yeah.
Yeah, because what's the actor's name? That's
Superman,
yeah, Henry Cavill or
Henry
whatever.
Cavill, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, he he
that's him.
he just does not look like he fits the part. Let me see
Yeah.
if I can pull this up while we're on it. This is off topic, but I have to pull this up. So okay,
Who
so
knows? It could be good, but
it could be,
it
but
has warning signs right now that are flashing. Right, beware.
yeah. So right now I'm gonna pull up a picture of Henry Cavill as Geralt, and this just does not. This first off, this looks like a wig. Like the thing he's wearing right here, this looks like a wig. Like it looks like he put this on his head and it's not his real hair. So that just doesn't look real. And I don't know. He just looks very clean cut and he doesn't look very big. He looks more like he could be an elf or something than I don't know. It just doesn't. He doesn't look like the appropriate cast. Now, granted, sometimes you think that, and then you go watch it and you're like, okay, this was fantastic. This was a new way to look at it. So he might pull it off, but just looking at this initial image, that doesn't look very good. Not saying the show's going to be bad, but
it could be good.
It could be good. But anyways, that was a tangent. So Final Fantasy 14 live action series. I don't know about this. I still have like PTSD from, and I use that jokingly. I shouldn't, but from Final Fantasy when the Spirits Within, when that came out in theaters, I was a kid, right? But I was really into Final Fantasy, and my parents took me to go see that.
Oh,
and then
you saw it in the theater.
Yeah, from then on, every time when I was a kid, I brought up Final Fantasy. Like my dad would say, "Oh, I like the movie," and it would just drive me nuts because Spirits Within had nothing to do with Final Fantasy. No chocobos, no Moogles, no magic really. Like very little like lore, maybe if you want to be generous.
It could have been called something else, and you wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, no one would.
You wouldn't know from watching the whole movie. Yeah,
no one would have been like, "Man, that was a Final Fantasy movie. Why didn't they call it that?"
No one would say that.
So I just look at this and I'm like, that's an unfair comparison. None of the same people, not the same context, but I don't know. I'm kind of hopeful about this. I could see this being really cool because, like we've been saying, there's a lot of lore to draw upon. There's a lot of great stories. I think people are going to be a little more open to the fact that they would leave things out, because I think people just understand you can't cover all that content. But also, I think people are going to be excited to see what they actually capture and put in there. And I think they're going to be a little less critical of maybe the casting and the way characters are presented than they would be if they tried to, for example, make a Final Fantasy X movie or a television series. They'd be like, that's not Titus. That doesn't look like Titus.
The player character gives you some wiggle room, right, to cast someone, or maybe even like a party, right? You could cast a party, and then people can quickly recognize, like, oh, so
that's the party.
There's our classes. There's our tank. There's our healer, right? And there's our DPS, and
that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you can. The writing for those characters, it doesn't have to really draw on anything other than what most people experience playing the game, basically.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. I mean, the fact that you don't have a main character, they could create an entire cast of characters, just like you said, from scratch that are interesting, have their own plot, or involvement in the story, and really come up with them from scratch, and people aren't going to be upset. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
So this was actually probably a good idea. I don't know.
Hopefully
it's that's the thing. Hopefully it's, I don't know. I know Final Fantasy 14 has that other show too, Daddy of Light. Have you seen anything about that?
No, not familiar actually.
So there's another show. It's called Final Fantasy 14 Daddy of Light. And I think it was primarily based in Japan, but it centers around a old-time veteran Final Fantasy fan who's in his 60s or something like that. And then his kid who's like 17 or 16, and they're having a hard time connecting. I think their mom died or something. And the dad plays Final Fantasy 14, and he ends up meeting his son in the game, and they become friends. But like one of them doesn't know it. I don't know. It sounds like a wacky idea for a show, but apparently it was kind of popular. So, but I don't know. This sounds more appealing, this new live action series, than that. So, anyways,
that sounds like it's kind of using the game as a backdrop for a different story, right?
Yeah, it doesn't.
This is actually going to be about
Final Fantasy 14,
the game. Yeah.
So, anyways, that's something for us to look forward to, I guess. So, Looks like BioPhoenix is having a good time.
We'll have to see what Eric thinks of the idea of a FF14 game or
This is just
TV show.
This is just Eric's year. He likes Final Fantasy 14. He's practically obsessed with it, and they're making a live action series about it. Dragon Quest V. He's a huge Dragon Quest fan. Next month or 2 months from now, they're coming out with Dragon Quest V, that movie, and it actually looks really, really good. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, a game he's been supporting for years, just came out this summer. This is a great year for him.
Yeah, and Dragon Quest XI coming out again.
Yeah, on getting the 8-bit version or 16-bit version.
Yeah,
so really, really cool.
All right, look forward to.
Yeah, let's gander over to RPGs coming out in July. Now, we're not going to be familiar with all these games. I think that's safe to say, but we're going to talk about the ones coming out in July. We're going to look at the trailers, kind of give our thoughts on that. And if you guys in the comments have some thoughts, feel free to share that as well. And this is something we're trying to do more often, or I should say monthly anyways. We did it last month where we talked about the games coming out in June. And so obviously we're here. It's July 1st. We're going to talk about the games coming out in July. Now, it's totally possible we're going to miss some, but I try to be as thorough as possible. So this first one is Luca, Born of a Dream. Now, this game is supposed to come out on, I got the release date written down. I know it's already out on Steam, but it's going to come out on Switch on July 3rd. And this game reminds me kind of a almost Undertale-like vibe. Maybe that's wrong, but it's kind of got a similar vibe, but a much more unique art style. Not that Undertale wasn't unique, because it was practically the middle name of Undertale was unique, but this looks more like a sketchbook type art aesthetic. It's a very, very strange, but kind of appealing in a way to check out. It looks like it could be really confusing. Have you seen anything about this game?
No, I just became familiar with it today. But the art style is almost like kind of like art on like a black Etch-a-Sketch is what it makes me think of, because it has that kind of drawn to life look to it.
Yeah. It's got like very positive reviews on Steam. Everyone's saying you got to go check it out. So it looks promising. It's supposed to come out July 3rd. Looks like a action-based indie RPG with a unique art style. So always down for that. But July 3rd, it's coming to Switch. So let's check out the next one here. We have Dragon Quest Builders 2. Now this is coming out on... Turn that off. It started playing the music there. It's coming out on July 12th on the Switch. This is a game that when it was first announced, or I first saw it, I was not very interested in it because kind of got like this Minecraft-like vibe to it. And I'm not really into that. But I don't know. There's something about it that makes it seem interesting to me. What about you?
Well, it's got multiplayer, right? I'm not familiar. Did the first Dragon Quest Builders have multiplayer in it?
That's the thing. I don't know. I'm new to it. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, the multiplayer aspect of it interests me a little bit. But yeah, I'm not familiar with the original game. I haven't played that.
So from what Eric was telling me, there is a light story element to it, that like a thing you have to do in the game. It's not just, go build stuff. So there's that element to it, but then there's, like you said, there's a multiplayer element. So you can get on with your friends and you can kind of make little Dragon Quest cities and stuff like that. And, you can see all the monsters and such from Dragon Quest games. And it looks like it could be a really good time killer for sure. I could see me picking this up for maybe an hour or something like that on the weekend, or maybe meeting up with some friends to kind of hang out for an hour or two online maybe, and kind of chill and play this game. And the fact that it's set in a Dragon Quest world is just, I think, pretty awesome. I've been really getting into Dragon Quest over the last year and a half. Between Dragon Quest 11, Dragon Quest 5, I've been playing Dragon Quest 3 some more, and yeah, I could see me getting into this. It just depends on the price point for me, honestly. I don't think I'd get it on day one, but I could definitely see me picking this up in the future. What about you?
Yeah.
Does this appeal to you at all?
I'm kind of in your boat, not really into Minecraft.
Yeah.
But I don't know. On the fence, I guess I would say. On the fence. But I mean, if a friend of mine picks it up and is like really into it, then yeah, like I could see myself getting it and getting lost building pyramids and slimes and whatnot.
Yeah. So there's that. That's coming out on July 12th. So also coming out on July 12th is God Eater 3. And this is coming to the Switch. I think it's already out on the PS4, to be honest. But it's, I don't know, like there's something about this game that just doesn't look like something I would like. It's got this like Japanese kind of vibe to it, but it's also, I don't know. I guess it doesn't look bad.
I mean, it looks like anime Monster Hunter, to be honest.
Right? Yeah, and it seems like they're really pushing this like play with friends element.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I think the PS4 version has like, maybe I might be wrong, but like up to 8 players, like raids, kind of like against powerful monsters and stuff.
oh.
I don't know if the Switch version will have up to 8 players, but yeah,
Well,
it has a very Monster Hunter look to me.
It says right here, up to 8 players online. So,
oh, okay.
Seems like it could be a good time. But anyway, so that's coming out on July 12th. Now, this next game I think is kind of a stretch to call it an RPG, but I've seen it listed in a few places. So we have Kill Squad coming to PC. Now, this is, you kind of scoot forward in the video a little bit. It does look kind of like it's kind of got an almost like, I want to say like a Diablo type vibe to it.
Yeah.
Where you have a party of characters, you go kill stuff, you buy new loot, that kind of grind. And those games are a lot of fun to play with friends. It seems like that's kind of the theme this summer, is just getting games you can play with multiplayer with other people. And it could be a draw for that. The thing is, I just feel as if there's already so many of these games out there, and like I'm not too familiar with what would make this one more special, I guess you could say. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, this game in particular has kind of like a Diablo or like a Gauntlet Legends, like an old school Gauntlet Legends kind of feel to it. Because I just see the characters kind of strafing and like backing up from the enemies, but like shooting at them, like lots of enemies on the screen. Yeah, those games are best played with a group of 4 people if you can get them all together.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, because I wasn't really into like Diablo games that much. I played them with friends when I was younger, but I didn't really play them. That's the only time I really played them. And I bought Diablo 3 when it came out, and I played it for like 2 days, and then it just kind of sat on a shelf for like a year and a half until my cousin came down, and we were bored, and we just picked it up, and man, we played the crap out of that for like a week while he was down, just like every single night, just for a couple of hours every night. And it was a blast playing it with my cousin, but playing it by myself was just not as much fun for me. It's
not the same.
Yeah. So, but anyways,
and I kind of wonder if these games like God Eater and this Kill Squad game, I wonder if they're kind of pushed to this time of year, like summertime, because like people are out of school, and
they
also
have that time.
Yeah, people have got more time in the summer. And also, like, coming up in the fall, you've got your bigger games coming out, like Monster Hunter expansion, and there's always a new Call of Duty game, you know.
Yeah.
So they're kind of trying to capitalize on the timing. That might be why they're all coming out at around this time. So
that makes sense.
yeah.
Good point. All right, so we got that one. Then we have, hold on, let me see what, that is coming out on July 16th for PC. Then we have Gloomhaven coming out on July 16th also. This game is, let's get a little forward in here. This one seems a little more interesting to me. It's it's kind of got like that old school like dungeon crawling vibe to it. So this seems
apparently this is a well, I could be wrong, but I think this is a this one is a board game, like, and this is the video game version of it. Gloomhaven.
Really?
It sounds familiar. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Let me
Yeah, because it kind of has that like Dungeons and Dragons like vibe to it, where you know where it starts off. It's kind of it's meant to be played as a board game or like a card game or something like that, and then this is kind of the more visual element of it.
Yeah, so. Yeah, it's a tabletop game.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, were you ever into those style of games?
Not really the D&D type of games, but I have played some kind of more. I don't know what you would call them. Have you heard of Arkham Horror? It's a board game that's kind of like party based, cooperative board game.
Oh, okay. Is that something you still do, or?
Not very often. Some friends of mine have it, and we break it out every once in a while, but not regularly. No.
Yeah, there's never something I really got into. Not that I wouldn't have, but I just never had the opportunity. Very cool. So this is coming out, if this suits your fancy, this is coming out on July 16th for PC. So looks like Kotaku's given it some good reviews, so that's always a good thing. Then we have on July 18th, Warlocks Godslayers. This is the 1 second. Are you familiar with this at all?
I am
Warlocks series. Yeah. Pull this off real quick. It looks like a we'll pull up the. Yeah. It's here. I'm pulling up the Steam here.
When balanced,
like a platformer with RPG elements, kind of.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing that I was going to bring up. I was trying to
turns into chaos.
Turn this off. So it's got a very interesting art style to it that I like, and it's like you said, it's a platformer, but supposed to have a lot of RPG elements here. You can clearly see a pretty expansive skill tree and equipment and stuff like that. And you know, there's a niche following for these types of games. It looks like it's very well polished, very well executed. Definitely looks like it's not a cheap game to make. And yeah, I mean, it looks pretty interesting. So that's coming out on PC on July 18th. I mean, I just look at this and I feel like I would rather play this on the Switch.
Yeah, true.
So
maybe it's good for people who have gone through Bloodstained and they want more of kind of the same thing. Although this is different vibe.
Right. Well, I mean, it's kind of a similar concept, like a little more goofy.
Similar style of gameplay. It looks like, yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyways, this is coming out on July 18th, I think. July 18th. Yep. And then finally, we have, I think, probably most anticipated game that we've talked about, is Fire Emblem Three Houses. This is finally coming out on July 26th. Now, to be honest, I have not been that excited about this game just because of the way they've presented the information has been pretty lackluster. Most of the trailers have been very filled with a lot of like very cheesy dialogue and just like very over the top anime, and I didn't really get a good vibe of the story. A lot of the story that they've provided seemed more like a prologue than an actual explanation of what the story is like. So I've been kind of apprehensive about this game. But from the games listed coming out July seemed a little slow to me. I think this one probably appeals to me the most, or down to my style the most, because being it's a very classic series. It's a lot of people are really into this, but it doesn't look that bad. Like they are doing some experimentation with some of the more like choose your own path styled stories with a lot of building relationships and making all these decisions and everything like that, which has always kind of been there lately, but seems like they're focusing on that more so, kind of persona in a military setting, it looks like to me. But it also has the typical return to roots combat, it appears anyways. That's what I've been seeing people say. But are you a Fire Emblem fan? Kind of
casual Fire Emblem fan. I've played the one on the GameCube and the Wii, and a little bit of, I think it was Sacred Stones on the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah.
But that's it. I didn't play any of the ones on the DS, which I understand is kind of where the series did some good things, but also some not so good things, right? So it's kind of been people are on the fence about how good those games are.
The thing is, like, from hardcore fans of Fire Emblem, it's kind of at that point where I feel as if they haven't had a really satisfying game in a while. And it's at that point where it seems like every time one's announced, people get really excited. Like, oh, is this going to be the
one? Yeah,
the one that it's back. It's kind of like with Final Fantasy, where when they announce a new Final Fantasy, you're like deep down, it's probably going to suck, but you just hope maybe this time
they'll get it right this time.
Yeah, like it used to be. So I don't know. I don't know. There's something about it that makes me want to pick it up, but it's just the fact that it's going to cost $60, and there's a good chance I won't like it. It just makes me hesitant. But
right,
I don't know. I
suspect it will sell very well.
Yeah. There's just this thing about the fact that it's supposed to be a very, serious war drama, but then, you go back and it's like this, like high school in a castle, like vibe, which I don't know. But one thing I did see the developers talk about that I know a lot of fans were worried about was, they thought that since you get to choose the 3 different paths of the story, they thought it was basically going to be the same story, but just from like a different perspective. And there wasn't going to be anything really new about that other than like just the fact that you're playing with a different avatar. And the developers did come out and they said, no, that's not the case. Each story is its own in-depth story with its own unique cutscenes and its own character arc and everything like that. So technically with this game, you are getting 3 different stories. So there would be a lot of replay value here. But again, I think this is one of those games where I'm interested, despite the fact that they've done barely any promotion that's exciting. There's something about it that I'm still kind of interested in, because it kind of almost has like a Harry Potter vibe. Like if they're in a castle with like these flaming lanterns and like everyone's trying to study and there's like magic and stuff. It's kind of interesting vibe it's got going on here. It could be interesting, I guess, but I want to check out what people say when this game comes out. Maybe some of the initial reviews. I mean, like you said with some of the other games, maybe the fact that they chose a July release date is because they really wouldn't have to compete with much else. And, coming out in July 26th, I believe. Let me double check that. July 26th. I mean, hey, they ain't got nothing to really compete with besides some indie titles and some like Western RPGs on the PC. There's not much else there for them to compete with. So,
yeah.
I mean,
I remember Octopath Traveler came out last year, early summer, right?
And it did phenomenal.
This is a little bit later. Yeah, and it sold like 1 million copies, and that was a new IP, and this is Fire Emblem, right? So, yeah, so I think it will sell very well.
And the thing is, I know people are really mad about some people, I should say, are mad about the new direction of the series with this more like anime vibe to it than people have felt it had in the past. But the thing is, they keep doing it. And if they keep doing it, that tells me that some people out there must like it, right? They wouldn't just keep doing that if it wasn't selling. So,
well, I have a feeling that Japan just eats it up.
They're just like, because phenomenal,
especially this school setting, because you've got so many anime TV shows set in school, right?
Yeah, so this is like
we had Final Fantasy Type 0, we had Valkyria Chronicles 2 that did a very similar thing, and there are other examples as well. Trails of Cold Steel, you're like in military school.
Yeah,
very common trope these days.
Yeah. I really did not like Final Fantasy Type 0 at all, unfortunately. I know some people did, but I just did not like it. And when you say Type 0, this looks very similar to Type 0, I think. From
at least in the
vibe
setup, right?
Yeah. So that makes me a little less excited about this, but I don't know. If I need something to play and this is getting good reviews, I'll pick it up. I'll try it out. So anyways, that's that. You plan on picking it up at all?
I gotta wait for the reviews. But yeah. I gotta wait and see.
I'm trying to place it here. Where will I commit if I buy it? If I start seeing it get 9s or above, I will buy it. I'll buy it at $60. I think if it's getting like an 8 or above, I think I'm gonna wait till it's like a $30 purchase. But anything below an 8, I'm not buying it unless it's like a $5 purchase or something.
I'll probably look at the user score also of like the like on you can go on Metacritic and look at the user score and see what the people who love the game are saying about it and see what people who don't like the game are saying about it.
Yeah.
Kind of gauge what might be an issue or what makes it good.
Phoenix brings up I think a more coherent point that I brought up before. He said Fire Emblem always had an anime vibe, but I guess it's the whole dating people. That's actually what I meant. I know I was trying to splice it, but I didn't do it correctly. But I know that's one thing that people got really mad about. Some veteran fans was they added this whole dating thing to it. And I know there's whole communities built around this whole dating vibe, apparently. And it's just some people don't like that.
Yeah.
I don't like that, but it's whatever. What are you gonna do? So anyways, that's the games coming out in July that we knew about. If there is one that we missed, let us know in the comments and we will try to bring that up next week. We'll take a look at it. And that's July. So we're gonna wrap things up now with a question from Discord, Second Entity. He asks, has there ever been an RPG that you guys really liked that had one thing about it that kind of ruined the overall experience? That's one part of the question. Then he also asks, alternatively, have you ever played a mediocre RPG that you thought could have been great with a few changes? Stan, you kind of brought up a point earlier before we started the podcast where you said, well, if I really liked it, it didn't really ruin the game for me. So I think what he means is like, I don't know, what's the best way to say this? You enjoyed the game, like you think you would have liked it, but like this one glaring issue just kind of ended up killing the experience for you, maybe. But like you think without that you would have enjoyed it, maybe. I don't know. That's kind of long-winded. But
Yeah,
I get what he's trying to
is.
say. But
hmm Well, the example that comes to my mind of a game that I enjoyed, but there was like one thing that stuck out to me that was like just
Mhm.
every time I saw it was like, oh, was Lightning Returns actually.
Oh, Lightning Returns. What
Final
about
Fantasy.
that?
Just the whole dress up
Oh, the dress
aspects to the
sphere thing
game.
or whatever. Yeah.
Well, yeah, she switches classes, and yeah, like similar to Final Fantasy X too. When you change class, she changes costume,
Hmm.
right? But all of her costume are, well, maybe not all of them, but quite a few of them are very revealing, and like this is not a costume you would wear in battle, right? And
Yeah.
it also doesn't make sense. Like you switch to your like black mage class, and she's got like this purple like nightgown on, and it's like the it's not even paying homage to like the like black mage class of Final Fantasy, you know?
Like Black
It's
Mage
just like,
lingerie.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
that just felt so out of place, and like also because it's not like Lightning's character. Like
Yeah. She
this
doesn't
is
like
like,
that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, this is like an ex-soldier turned angel person essentially, right? Who is like very devoted to her duty, but now we're like when we change classes or like get new classes and mess around with them, it's like we're playing Barbie dress up, you know, essentially.
Yeah.
That's which I'm sure that's why it's in the game because
They had
certain
this.
people like that aspect of it, but it just didn't fit. It was so out of place for me. And so that really stuck with me. Like the game was fine except for that, you know, like
I
I
think.
even don't mind the whole timer mechanic. Like the game is on a timer essentially. You got to get through it within a certain number of days and accomplish as much as you can.
Yeah. I
That
didn't.
bothers me less than the whole dress up aspect.
I thought the game. I thought that game wasn't as bad as a lot of people gave it credit or criticized it for. I like the gameplay of it. I didn't mind the music at all. I mean, even like some of the animations weren't that bad. Honestly, I thought like it was way better than people were giving it credit for. But the thing you brought up with the revealing attire, that was kind of like, oh, this doesn't fit our character. But the other thing I had a hard time with that game was just the premise of Lightning, like God took away Lightning's emotions. So
That was an
like,
odd choice, yeah.
yeah, so now you have this character that's like monotone the whole game, or like most of the game. And I'm just like
Yeah,
that wasn't a good decision because it's just boring. Or
right.
like we're gonna take old Hope but stick him in young Hope's body. And I know there's something else that happened with that, but I was just slapping my head like, why didn't you just use old
Yeah,
Hope?
it was very wacky.
Yeah, just use old
Honestly,
Hope.
the more interesting part of that story of that game was the whole like time is frozen. Like people are not aging, right? They're
Yeah.
immortal, but they can still die.
Mm.
But then also the world is like coming to an end.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of seeing like how these people have been alive for hundreds of years, but you're also seeing like how they're choosing to do their last day, their
Right.
last days, right, as the world is coming to an end. So it was interesting that like kind of the world building and like the NPCs were more in not more important, but they were more interesting than the actual cast of the Final Fantasy game I was playing, which is like usually it's the reverse,
Yeah.
right? Usually like the characters are very interesting and the NPCs are just kind of there for the characters you care about to have somebody to talk to, right?
Sure.
But it was like the reverse. Like Lightning was boring, right?
Yeah,
And
because she
some of
was
the
just
other
this.
main cast characters coming back were boring. And but then it was interesting to see the NPCs like in their stories, like
And
how
their
those were playing
reaction.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they could, I didn't buy that game day one. I ended up picking it up
used.
from
Yeah,
used for like $10. So for that
same,
price point,
same. Yeah.
like I had a good time with it, but I'm not sure what I would have felt if I bought it day one at $60. But
Mhm.
I enjoyed it aside from the things I said and the jackassery ending. But
Yeah.
uh, you know, um, for me, I'm trying to think of a game that I enjoyed, but there was one thing about it that ruined it for me. And I think that for Tales of Berseria, I I love that game. That was a great game. I was really, really surprised by it. I love the story, but the gameplay for that game is just it was just way too easy for me.
Too easy, yeah.
Like I really didn't even learn the combat system because I was just
Mashing.
mashing buttons and
Yeah.
I was winning. And there was just so many I tried putting it on like the hardest setting and I was still mashing buttons and winning, but because I had it on the hardest setting, it kept giving me all this gear. Then I had to like sift through it to try to sell it, and it was just I don't know. But yeah, that's the basic thing is just like the what's turned it around for me with the Tales series, because I kind of got a similar vibe with other games that the gameplay was just too easy and just very button mashy. But Tales of Vesperia, I got that on the Switch. I didn't play it when it came out. The gameplay on that is really tight and really, really good. And that's not necessarily the easiest game to play. I think, if you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to be able to beat the bosses. And you really have to know how to play the game. And like I think the gameplay in that game really shines. So especially after playing Vesperia, when I go back and look at Berseria and play that, I just think, man, like if this game had the gameplay from Vesperia and the story from Berseria, this would just be phenomenal. This would be phenomenal. But when I play Berseria, I just think that I would almost rather just watch this as like a Netflix series or like an anime because I don't like playing the game. It's just I'm just waiting to get to another cutscene.
Right.
Like so I don't know. Did you play Berseria at all?
Berseria?
Yeah.
I haven't played that one yet. I really like Tales of the Abyss. That's like my favorite Tales game, and it's actually one of my favorite JRPGs in general. Like
Tales of Abyss. I haven't played that one.
Tales of the Abyss. That's definitely in my top 10, maybe even top 5 JRPGs.
Really?
Yeah, it's really good.
That's one that I don't hear brought up that often. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think more people grew up with Symphonia and Vesperia.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, if you I think if you go in like Tales forums and fan sites and stuff and ask them like what are the best Tales games, it's like Symphonia, Abyss, and Vesperia that I think come up the most often.
Yeah. That
was kind of their like peak, right? Like that was like the Tales games like kind of golden era there that they had in like the mid 2000s or so, mid to late 2000s.
What do you think happened to them? They just were pumping them out too fast, or?
I think Tales of Xillia was hurt them, if I remember. Like I think it came out and it's not a bad game, but it was like unfinished. The ending was kind of rushed.
Yeah.
I played that one and I thought that was okay, not as good as the previous 3. But then they made Xillia 2, which was just like a really real head scratcher. And then they made Zestiria, which the story is very generic and the gameplay is maybe the worst in the series that I've played. It's not good. It has all kinds of camera issues, at least when I played it. I don't know if it's changed, but and then Berseria has been kind of they're pulling up from the nosedive essentially, right? So it's not, like you said, it has a good story, but the gameplay is not quite there. So it's hopefully they're heading back in that right direction.
Well, the thing is, usually with RPGs, like I'm all about the story with role-playing games. And when a game doesn't have a good story, I have a really hard time staying invested in it unless the gameplay is just phenomenal. And when it came down to Berseria, like the way they set that up is just phenomenal in my opinion. And I was just really, really impressed with the storytelling. I was surprised to get this from a Tales game because before that, I had goofed off a little bit with Zestiria. Like you said, it was very generic. And then the only other Tales game I had ever really seen was a little bit of Xillia. I thought it was okay, but I didn't think it was like fantastic. So I kind of stayed away from the Tales games, to be honest. Even growing up, like I didn't really touch them. I don't know why. I just didn't really. Something about them just looked very generic to me, and so that once I finally did dive in, it was really really late, and Zestiria really put a bad taste in my mouth. Zillia was kind of a little bit better, but I was like, I don't know. So I didn't expect a good story at all, right? So once I started playing Berseria, I was blown away. Like, this is really well done. The characters are great. The camaraderie for the characters are great. The plot line's great. I'm interested. I want to know more. And I don't know, man, but just the gameplay for that is just not there for me at all. So I'm hoping
I'll have to play it sometime.
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll
see how it is.
It's getting pretty cheap, so I definitely recommend it for the price. But I'm kind of at that point where I'm thinking that Tales of Arise, the next Tales game, they're gonna fix like both those issues, because it looks like they kind of responded to the criticism from Zestiria with it just being very generic, and they made Berseria, and actually they worked on the story, they worked on the world. I know it's supposed to be a prequel, I think, to Zestiria, but it's really well done from that standpoint. So I think they really responded to that criticism. But I'm hoping that Tales of Arise keeps that momentum going with the story, but then brings back the gameplay from some of the earlier games and maybe even improves upon it further. That would be just, dude, I'd be super excited for that. So, but that's kind of where it's at with me. Lane says, I played Abyss this year. It was awesome. I hope Arise is like Abyss and Vesperia. Totally agree. Biofink says, I find Zillia 1 was the last great one for a while. I mean, like I said, I didn't think Zillia was bad, but I'm kind of with you there, Stan. So
it just wasn't quite at the level of the previous three, I think.
Yeah. It had potential, but it wasn't
as good.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bad game by any means. Yeah. The next two, Zillia 2 and Zestiria.
So that would probably be a good pick for the second part of his question when he says, alternatively, have you ever played a mediocre RPG that you thought could have been great with a few changes? Maybe Zillia might have been right up the... It was a mediocre RPG, but if you made a few tweaks to it, it could have been phenomenal or good.
Nothing comes to mind for that game, for Zillia. I just think it needed the ending was kind of rushed. So that's like a writing and story planning thing.
Yeah, it's pretty drastic.
Yeah.
When I think, well, to me, if I'll go ahead and name one here. To me, when I play Secret of Mana, I just think, like, if they just did some like UI updates with this game, like maybe told me the weapon at the shop was better than the one I had before I bought it, like like that would really improve me playing this game. And I think kind of overhauling the combat system a little bit to where the point where, I don't go from full health to 0 because I've been like stuck in like a little tiny 32 by 32 pixel alleyway, and I'm just continuously getting stunned. I mean, if they kind of like overhauled that a little bit, I think aside from those issues, I think that game would be just phenomenal for me.
Yeah,
it's got great artwork. It's got a generic story, but it's kind of missing some parts, but it's still pretty good. And then the music and artwork are just phenomenal. So
onto the SNES, if I remember right, there was some kind of CD system that they had to abort and change it. So
CD system for the SNES.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like a CD add-on or some kind of add-on that was going to give them more room, like more space on the cart, or something.
Well, I mean, obviously they had the Nintendo PlayStation, which was not a thing.
Maybe that was it. It was originally Secret of Mana was going to be the game was going to be much bigger in scope and story and everything, and it had to be cut way down. And so I wonder how much of the issues with like the hit stun and the hit detection and stuff is just a product of that.
Yeah. I do know that's one thing I did read was that initially the story for Secret Mana was going to be much more detailed and much bigger in scope, but they ended up having to cut a lot of that down because it was going to come out on a different, I think you're right, a more CD based system, so there's going to be more room, so they had to cut a lot of that out. So
yeah, there's even some areas I think in the game where there's like a staircase that you could like go up,
yeah,
but they just like block it off with like a wall or like spikes or something. And so you look at it visually and it's like there has to be a way to get through. And I remember just like running around on the map trying to
figure
like
it out.
try and squeeze my way through there and get up that staircase or whatever. But then I was reading an article after the fact and they're like, yeah, there was going to be a room up there, but it just got cut, and for whatever reason they left the stairs there.
So it's a game, it's a product of its development cycle, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, like there's other games I can think of, even more modern games like Final Fantasy 15. I thought that game was, it had a few changes.
That's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah. What were some of the changes you'd have made in that game?
Well, it's a story/plot issue that kind of goes into the gameplay. So to me, like, your game is going to have two focuses, one of the two, right? Sometimes you can do both, but like it's got to be the story or the gameplay, right? And like one is going to serve the other and make it stronger. So typically in an RPG, like the story is really what most players are playing for, right?
Yeah.
At least I think a lot of Final Fantasy players are. And so Final Fantasy 15 made like a big mistake in my opinion of making an open world game in which the characters usually like want to go somewhere very specific and very quickly, right?
Yeah.
So like once and spoilers, right? So click away if for some reason this game isn't spoiled for you yet, but like
spoil it.
Yeah, once Insomnia falls, like very early in the game, the Empire comes in and destroys Insomnia, which you find out through the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Not the best way to do that, but
how
then
quickly was that newspaper printed? I mean,
yeah, but then like an hour later, I'm like fishing up in the mountains, right? It's like, wait, I thought I was the prince, and like the kingdom was destroyed, and now I need to go find these royal arms that are out in the countryside and get to Luna as fast as possible because she has the ring, right? And like that's what I need to
there's
defeat
all this
the
stuff
Empire.
at stake. Yeah.
But I, the player, am rewarded for delaying that like very time sensitive quest as long as possible, right?
Yeah.
There's all these other dungeons that don't have royal arms in them. There's all these monster hunts to do that I get rewarded for as the player, right? If I do them. But it makes no context in the sense of the story. Number one, because like he's the prince of the kingdom, right? And why are you gonna ask the prince for help with your broken down car or your tomato delivery that's out there, right?
He's a man sense. Of the people.
makes no sense. And then well, like I said before, like it's a problem in a lot of open world games where you're doing a main quest line and the NPCs are like, whatever, meet me down at the docks, right, at night tonight or something, right? Yeah. But it's an open world game, so you can just do whatever you want for hours and hours and hours, and then you get there, and then the NPC responds like, "Oh, thank God you've come," like, and it just proceeds as normal. Like that's a huge like rift between the gameplay and the story for me. Yeah. So I think if you were gonna have Final Fantasy 15 be an open world game like they wanted to, the fall of Insomnia needs to be the ends the open world section of the game, essentially. Mm-hmm. Like you can set up the story so that Noctis goes out into the world with his buddies, and it's a road trip, and it's kind of a leisurely thing. Like he's unaware of all the politics going on. And his goal is to go out and get the royal arms, right? That's the objective. But he doesn't have a time commitment like over his head, right? There's nothing pressing about it. It's just a road trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can spend as long as they want. And then once you collect the last one and you're like on your way back, you can have the incident where the Empire invades, right? And then from that point forward, for the purpose of the story, you take away a lot of the open world aspect of the game. Like, because they do that anyway later, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
that's like a big sticking point for me that like really
just
drags that game down.
Yeah, it's you bring up a lot of good points just the from the open world setup, because one of the aspects that's supposed to be enjoyable about an open world game is the exploration aspect, right? Exploring the world, becoming immersed in the world, and that's one of the reasons open world games became so popular, was this sandbox RPG where you could just really just go deep into a game and like really just explore the towns and everything and get really immersed into it. And the most important city for the character, the main character, the thing that drives the whole game, you should have been able to explore Insomnia. I mean, and it's not that like I was so curious what those buildings looked like or something like that. It's just from an emotional standpoint, I don't have any attachment to that. I don't have attachment to his father. We didn't get to spend much time with him because he was in Insomnia. So it was just very, very strange. And it was also strange too that after it fell, we didn't really run into anybody from Insomnia. Like, were these people not fleeing the city? And by the time he makes it back, like everyone's dead. I don't like it. So it's just it had some issues for sure. And I think you're right. If they restructured it to be more congruent with an open world game, I think it would have worked a lot better. And I think it's kind of obvious this game was initially designed to be more linear, and then they kind of switched to an open world setup later in development, because the story does not appeal to an open world game at all. You're absolutely right.
It just doesn't work. Yeah. Like you're saying with Insomnia, something they could have done was have maybe 1 or 2 chapters with like Luna and maybe even King Regis in the party, and you have some quest or something you can do in Insomnia. That would have
improved things a lot.
A lot of issues, I feel like. Yeah, you would have also got to know Luna better as a character, right? So, and you could have had a good contrast of like Luna and King Regis are dealing with the Empire and they know something bad is in the works, right? But then you have Noctis who's kind of joyriding with his friends, unaware, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to have a point where like Insomnia fell. Like why would Noctis care about anything else after that, like from that point forward, other than defeating the Empire and trying to bring his kingdom back?
Yeah, having some more exposition earlier in the game surrounding those two characters, his father and Luna, would have really helped things a lot, because both those characters were a big weakness, I think, in that game, was just not developing those more, especially after what happens to Luna and everything. It's just it just wasn't very satisfying, and they could have also fleshed out Core some more with those earlier events. They could have fleshed out Jared, because we had to go avenge Jared's death. And I remember
Jared.
Yeah, I remember thinking to myself when I saw avenge Jared in the game the first time, I was like, "Who's Jared?" Like, I was serious. I didn't know who he was. And that's the first time it hit me, like, this might not be very good. So, but yeah, I know they should have an episode Jared.
And it's really confusing to me, because I thought the Final Fantasy, Square Enix developers like knew this was an issue, because way back in Final Fantasy X, there are points in the game where they don't allow you to play Blitzball or board the airship, even, I think, at some points, because like it wouldn't make context in the story. Like, I think it's when you're going into the wedding scene to try and save Yuna, right? Well, there are save points in the airship, right? Because they want you to be able to save your game. But at every save point, you can access the Blitzball mini game, right?
But yeah, at that point, it's not a. It doesn't make sense
It's
to play
it's grayed
post
out. It
goal.
won't even allow you to do it. So it's like, so you are aware this is an issue where there's some points where you need to restrict the player's freedom because the story needs to take center stage. Otherwise, you're going to suck some people out of the story, and it it won't feel right, you know.
Right.
But then here we are, Final Fantasy 15, and just they're trying to tell you this story, but the gameplay and the story are not congruent with each other. And it's like, how did you make this mistake when almost, well, about 15 years ago, like you were aware it was an issue to the point where you removed a mini game. You restricted access to a mini game, right?
Yeah, and you've seen that with other games too, where they'll kind of limit what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
In 15, it was also kind of weird where you got the dog. You went up to the dog to go back in time.
Yeah, so that you could still access the open world stuff.
Yeah, but it was just like a massive plot hole because it's just like, why don't you?
Yeah, how does that work?
If you go back in time, stop some of these things from happening. Like, Ignis
Right.
probably would really thank you. You could stop that from happening. Yeah, but I mean, all in all, though, I've played through Final Fantasy 15 twice now, and if you play with all the side content that they put in there too, and kind of include it where it should be in the game, it is a better experience. And I can't say it's absolutely terrible. So I do think it kind of fits that description for me, where it's kind of mediocre, but I could see the real potential this game could have had if they changed a few things. I think it would have been a much better experience. But I can't really think of anything else though, a mediocre RPG that you thought could have been great with the change. It's like
Final Fantasy VIII, maybe, with
the
enemies not scaling with you.
Yeah, if they
that, like, the enemy scaling, get rid of that.
Final Fantasy VIII's kind of a similar vibe with me than the 15, but not quite as harsh. Where I didn't really like the enemy scaling, like you pointed out. And then there were one or two plot points in the game where I just feel like that was a really bad decision.
We were all in school together.
Right? Yeah, like they all knew each other or whatever. So
that was a real head scratcher. Yeah.
Yeah, or the fact that like at this point I'm basically spoiling the game a little bit, but the fact that like in the basement there's these contractors that have been living there for like ever, and like no one's known about it. Like, I was just like, what are you talking about? This is stupid. This is stupid. So,
yeah.
But the thing is with Final Fantasy VIII, is it's like that game's story is, I don't want to say so complicated, like it's like convoluted. That's not what I'm trying to say, although it is a little convoluted, but it's so complicated and intricate, but in a good way. And that there's parts of the story where I look at it and I'm like, man, this is some of the best Final Fantasy's ever had. I think like with the whole Laguna thing, that whole character arc and the way that tied into the game, I thought was just awesome. Like there's so much payoff for that. And just everything else with the game, from the fact that like it was like a huge step up from Final Fantasy VII with the graphics, the music was fantastic, the characters were great. It still had a kind of a mind or head scratcher ending, but it was still an awesome ending. I think like that was still a great game despite its flaws. So I don't know if I would quite put it in the same camp as 15, because I think like 15 just like Final Fantasy VIII was very compartmentalized with the issues that I had with it. I could kind of mark them off and say, well, I didn't like this. Whereas with 15, it was more of a macro sense. Like 15, I kind of get the vibe like you kind of need to remake the whole game.
Can't count them all on. You start running out of fingers with issues, right?
Yeah, you're just like, well, I don't have 15 fingers or 15 problems. But, with 8, it's like, you fix these few things. So 8 might be a better pick for me. Like, okay, you fix the scaling thing and you kind of like round off some of these plot points a little bit, make it a little more reasonable. And we got a much better game. I think they'd have to fix the whole like drawing magic thing too, because not only was that boring, it would break the game too. If you got certain spells, you could get like 9,000 HP like an hour into the game, which ruins the whole game. So, but yeah, I think that's all I can think of at the top of my head here. So, you got anything else?
No, those were the ones that came to my mind.
Very cool.
FF15 and Lightning Returns.
Oh, Lightning Returns, yeah.
Yeah.
All good books. All right, so let's just call it quits there, and let's wrap it up. So yeah, that was Final Fantasy VIII voice acting, Final Fantasy XIV live action, RPGs coming out in July. Hit some Discord questions, and we'll have to hit some more next week. But again, I want to thank Stan for coming on here and filling in for Eric, and I'm sure Eric will be healthy next week, but we'll be back at it. So thanks everyone for checking us out, and we'll catch you all later. Stay easy.
See ya.